Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by thelines.com. I'm Eli Hershkovich, joined as always by Justin Perri at JustinPerri8 on X, shot quality betting data analyst for Shot Quality and Shot Quality Bets. How are we doing, Justin, after a monster college basketball weekend?
It was a monster weekend, to say the least. I did pretty well. I broke even fully on Sunday, and I was up about 3.5 units on Saturday. Equal distribution between live and pregame bets, so that was pretty fun. Hit on one of my best bets, which was that BYU game. Crushed the market, got like 4.5 overnight. Overnights went like 7 and 2, so that's really good to see. I was
surprised by that line move.
Well, I think, sometimes you get that elevation stuff. People kind of catch on. I don't know. It is hard to go out there and play in Provo. But we're going to talk about some great games. We got another great week. You just don't get any rest. You barely get time to think about things in this sport because it's on to the next. Who's in the bubble that's starting to form? What separation are we really starting to see from the pack? And is there really time left for teams to enter contendership, or are we kind of settled in now to like that top 10 being one of the few to actually raise a banner come April?
Absolutely. And if you could hear it in my voice, a little raspy coming off of that 4-game road trip.
Jealous.
I think it was one of the best weekends of my life. And as soon as I said that to my wife, she said, "What about our wedding?" Which is fair, totally fair, but best weekend.
I said one of.
Right. It could still be top 20, top 30, right?
You have a kid, so like you're still in the clear. You're fine. I think that's totally fine. 4 games, and you saw some great ones, man. I mean, I was a little jealous for sure. I gotta get on a few of my own. I think I'll be back, maybe hopefully watching some St. John's Marquette next week, so that'll be fun. That's my next one. Big East till I die, and hey, 15th ranked Johnnies. Ever since I've been starting to come on the show, they just keep climbing up. So you better keep inviting me until we maybe raise a banner. I got a 50-1 ticket, and I got to go back to the Bahamas to cash it. So I really hope I have
to. Love it. Gotta say, our Maryland futures. I know it's a 2-game stretch, and we touched on the Illinois game on Friday, but that Indiana win.
Come on, I know.
Back-to-back road wins. People don't want to give Kevin Willard his flowers. I understand it. But watching Maryland, control the game for most of it and then blow it against a desperate Indiana team. But watching those Terps guards get clutch minutes and performing in them, Jacoby Gillespie, I said this on the last show, arguably the most underrated two-way point guard at least in college basketball. And Rodney Rice, maybe one of the most underrated shooters in the country. I wanted to pull this up before we get started, and I know we have 6 big Tuesday games to get into, which we'll dive into here in a moment. But KenPom's comps for Jacoby Gillespie. Are you ready for this?
I don't know if I am. I don't know, Eli. Am I?
I don't know if you are. Actually, I take that back. KenPom's comps for Rodney Rice. How about that? Or, you know what? I don't even know what comps I'm looking at here because they look off. Maybe it was Selton Miguel? Hold on one second. Oh, this was interesting. Deep. Selton Miguel, who came up big down the stretch. I finally hit it. 3rd time's the charm. One of Maryland's sharpshooters. Wing sharpshooter to an extent, shooting 42%, 40.2% to be exact on the season. Didn't shoot well in the first half at IU. Came back with a big second half. I think finished with 15 points. Yeah, so really played well in the final 20 minutes. His comp is Curtis Jones for Iowa State, which I found very interesting. Maryland had no shooting last year. Now with Rice, Miguel, and even Gillespie, you have shooting to space the floor around 2 pretty much standardized bigs in Reese and Queen. This team has a monster ceiling if they're able to get back to that defensive prowess that we saw earlier in the year when they were playing lower tier competition.
Definitely. That's the big thing that has to happen. They need to move a little bit lower down on that graph between offensive and defensive. The offense is there. They definitely have that fire. They can do what exactly we saw against Coach Mike Woodson, who just sometimes you got to laugh a little bit about how these things unfold. So
off the court. He didn't even want to get into the handshake line, and Luke Goody turned him around.
I know, crazy. But then, like, I feel like he just knew what was going to happen when they missed the front end and get the ball back down 2, and you're just like, oh no. And like, look, I'm not an anti Mike Woodson guy, like as a person. Like, obviously, like, you know, he was coach of the Knicks. I watched him. He tried to fight a little bit for the organization I love to not be totally terrible. I think those were like the Raymond Felton years. Good Lord. But, you know, so I don't like seeing him struggle. I wish he was doing better, but obviously you have to critique what's fair to critique. It hasn't been great. You got to close those out. You should be up more. You shouldn't let that back in. It has not been great for Indiana. I've been pretty low in Indiana. Their shot quality is bad compared to their efficiencies, so they've been a fade for me, and it's gone well. I did cash on I think I had a money line there live, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, gotta love how that's looking. Purdue's looking fun. A lot of teams that, you know, have that defensive prowess that are now maybe kicking it up into an offensive gear, but Maryland's a little different, right? It's that the offense has been consistent. If that defense starts to turn up, can they climb up that way on that KenPom map that I tweeted today?
Yeah, no, definitely check out Justin's image that he posted earlier on Twitter.
It's just a good, what KenPom does with that visualization of the D1 universe on the site is just super important, because there's so much clustering there at like the 100 to 150 and then again at the 250 to 300 that if you don't really understand that shape, you can get tricked into thinking like, oh, well, that jump from 250 to 200 is the same as jumping from 200 to 150. It's not. Those increments and the way those teams are distributed, you know, the increments on KenPom are not all made equal. And I think that map and the D1 universe stuff shows it. So important to understand.
I will say one last thing on the Terps here. 24-1 on FanDuel, Final Four future. Better odds than I got. I got 23-1. So be sure to price shop the best Final Four futures and national title futures for that matter over at thelines.com. And be sure to give the video a like too if you enjoy our college basketball picks. That we will be sharing here in a moment. But Maryland's defense isn't great, at least up to the standard that they were playing at over the first half of non-conference play, and once they played Villanova, it started to teeter a little bit off, and then beginning of Big Ten play in December. 78th percentile in defensive rating on CBB analytics since January 2nd, which was the official start of Big Ten play per se in the beginning of January at Washington, at Oregon, that 2-leg West Coast trip. But you look at shot qualities, defensive numbers for Maryland, 84th in defensive rating in half court, 0.96 points per possession overall this season, which is above average. So, and it's arguably better than what we've seen in Big Ten play, which makes me think we might get a little bit more positive regression for Maryland's defense. What was that cup?
Knicks playoffs.
Oh my God.
2024.
All right. Clearly we're veering off on the wrong path.
I know. We got to get to the games. But no, you're right. And there's a lot to be excited about because they are getting a little unlucky. And that does mean there's value. So ceiling floor. I don't know. I think you've got to trust it a little bit. You know, you when you have, I think, an elite aspect, it usually continues to translate well. And something I like, especially with like CBB analytics, is like looking at how teams do in losses versus wins really easily with their splits. Maryland, relatively consistent in terms of like the 4 factors and what you want to do. So like, to me, that does correlate well with getting unlucky, and they sort of lay that foundation even if the shots don't fall or their opponents. In this case, their opponents have fallen.
Yeah. I mean, you look at all their losses by 2 possessions or less, 282nd in KenPom's luck rating, despite ranking top 20 in KenPom's net efficiency. That is net rating, I should say. That is very, very impressive. But we digress on the Terps. Our favorite feature on the board right now. Let's get into the Tuesday card, Justin. Recording here on Monday, January 27th, early evening, late afternoon, depending on where I guess you're theoretically watching this on the back end of the show. Diving into number 15 St. John's in the latest AP Top 25 poll at Georgetown. Rematch of the matchup a couple weeks ago that you saw in person. Georgetown blew a 15-point lead in that one. Lost by 5 as 9-point underdogs. So the Hoyas did cover despite the Johnnies winning that one outright. Davion Smith did not play then, and he's already been ruled out as of Monday for this game, still dealing with the shoulder dislocation, I believe, and Pitino saying that he has to practice before he plays. Clearly, he didn't practice in the last 6 days since the St. John's Red Storm came back against Xavier. You go back to the first meeting, Georgetown, 19 turnovers. So that concerns me a little bit against this Johnny's press, pretty much a staple under a Rick Pitino defense. But I wonder if the number is still slightly inflated because we go back to that St. John's Xavier game that we handicapped and recapped on Friday's show. St. John's now riding a 12-game winning streak with that game included, and Xavier arguably should have won. So is St. John's inflated in the market coming off 12 straight wins and maybe a luck box cover involved in that winning streak?
Yes, most definitely. Probably should have lost in regulation. Won in overtime for sure. That wasn't really debatable. So the shot quality score does show a win. But again, you win by 8 in overtime and you only win the shot quality by 3. It usually indicates that you lost the regulation by shot quality. I'm not really sure how you judge what they've seen. Definitely a little bit of like one of those false flat spots if you like, spot taxes with Providence and Marquette coming to town to start February. And like you said, they've one of the nation's best winning streaks right now. And the efficiency metrics are a little high on them. We have them around the 46th best team in the nation. It's really not the offense. What you're seeing with the offense is what you're getting, 1.15 points per possession or 114.2 from KenPom per 100. Those are relatively within an error on both sides for both models. But the defense, 0.95 to 0.91, is indicative of a team that is getting lucky, especially from the mid-range, especially finishing at the rim. I do think Zubi Ejiofor has a lot of impact, but Sorber kind of missed part of that game at the end for Georgetown. Do they cover? Do they win? What happens there? I do think this is a tough spot to go into. Decently well coached. St. John's struggling a little bit with the coach and stuff. Like out of the timeout, they are not developing good shots, like at all. Probably one of the biggest red flags I have with my favorite college basketball team. It's not to say that, what's going on with Georgetown is much better, but they are actually defending out of the timeout well. And I mean, Sorber's reach is so tough to gauge. So I think there is maybe some potential for shot quality, maybe misunderstanding his dominance with that, like in terms of just how, positioning with that like size can lead to altered shots that maybe don't normally get altered. That is definitely a limitation that you need to be aware of when you have NBA-sized players going against guys that don't see it every game. That's something that can mess stuff up. So Georgetown a little bit lower rated on defense and offense themselves, but expected to have a 6.6 regression at the rim is probably like half of that's probably Sorber's arms. So let's give him a little bit of credit. I do think Georgetown is the move here. I will be taking, I think it's 4.5 right now as it's opening for tomorrow's game against St. John's at home. You look, it's a lot of blocks and steals from these Johnnies. You're going to need a good game from RJ, and I just don't think you're going to get it. The distribution, you need like Kadari and RJ Lewis and Aaron Scott are both going to have great games. Simeon Wilcher is going to have a great game. One or two of those guys isn't on their stuff, it's not going to happen. Like all 5 of the starters will kind of go crazy.
To that point, RJ Lewis, Kadari Richmond in the mid-range, we know how reliant St. John's, especially Richmond, is on that mid-range jump shot. Georgetown's mid-range defense, they rank in the 7th percentile in terms of mid-range twos allowed per game this season, 81st percentile in terms of mid-range efficiency allowed at 30.8%. But you look over the last 5, and we've seen a regression in that category, 30.9% in terms of the 2-point mid-range efficiency allowed to the opposition. So I'm a little bit concerned that maybe that blows back in their face, continues to blow back with what? St. John's coming off of a 5-day rest advantage, essentially.
Yep. Yeah, hasn't played in a long since Xavier. That's crazy.
Right. And then good spot to back Georgetown, but you mentioned the Tax coming off of 4 losses in their last 5 games. Also, you go back to the last matchup. Georgetown outbattled St. John's on the glass, per se, 44-38, which is hard to do against Zuby Ejiofor. Sorber dealt with foul trouble and also left the game late.
They played his foul trouble well, though. I gotta hand it to Cooley and Co. Like they did a good job. Like they're not timid with it. They trusted their guy. Why is a foul in the 19th minute different than the 21st minute? You tell me. It's not. I'm new age analytics, so yeah. No,
which I'm surprised Cooley has adapted to.
Yeah,
with his stature as a veteran, older coach per se.
Good for him. It's gonna keep your guys on the floor longer, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I mean, it can matter which minute they play, but mathematically, it really doesn't. Like, of course, clutch minutes matter, but if you get X minutes, points per minute out of a guy, you just want him on the floor to maximize his minutes, even if he misses minute 40 or minute 39. If he's on the floor for an extra 8 minutes, maybe you don't need him in minute 39, right? So, like, how that all works, how you approach that as a coach, and using your guys is so interesting and can limit or boost your team if you do it right. And again, it's all chance. It's like going for it on 4th down. Sometimes you look great doing the wrong thing. Sometimes you look stupid doing the right thing. It's very similar with fouls. So, yeah, it's tough.
For sure. And we'll see how he plays it this time around, or if Sorber even gets in foul trouble. But looking at, you mentioned how much of an impact Ejiofor can make, especially on the offensive glass, and down low as a post-up player for that matter. But you look at his post-up defense, surprisingly, per synergy, he ranks in the 54th percentile of points per possession allowed on opponents' post-up touches. So Sorber could have a bit of an edge down low, and he and this Georgetown offense, very, very efficient, hyper-efficient, elite efficiency for that matter, with their post-up offense. Georgetown also fighting for any at-large consideration. They would have to go on a run, granted, but it could start here. It would need to start here against St. John's at home. Very similar spot to Xavier against UConn on Saturday, despite Georgetown being a little bit more so outside of the at-large conversation. But you're looking at the Hoyas at 4.5. I'm going to wait to see, and maybe we'll see how the market moves. I'm going to wait to see how the market moves too. I like Georgetown. I'm just a little bit concerned with the turnovers maybe playing a little bit more of a role if St. John's can get out on the break with live ball turnovers. And then also rebounding. Will Georgetown be able to control the glass like they did against an elite St. John's rebounding team on both sides of the floor led by Ejiofor?
Yep, I'm fully with you. I think there might be some movement, and I'm not sure if it's going to 100% be something I lock in, but I would definitely lean towards Georgetown here.
All right, let's move on to the SEC. Kentucky at Tennessee. Both teams coming off a loss on Saturday, and back-to-back losses for that matter for Kentucky, going back to a couple Saturdays ago against Alabama. The most recent loss for Kentucky coming at Vandy. Vandy with back-to-back monster home wins.
Monster.
One being against Tennessee, and who we're going to handicap in this one, and the other coming against Kentucky this past Saturday. Tennessee coming off a loss to Auburn on the road. Great close game in Janai Broom's return for the Auburn Tigers. Kentucky allowing the second highest perimeter scoring rate in SEC play. That's where I want to start, because part of my handicap for Tennessee-Auburn going back to Saturday was, is this a spot where Chaz Lanier is going to regress offensively? 31.5% from 3 over his last 6. Struggled a bit in that game. Didn't get a ton of shots if you look at his shot volume against Auburn. But now he goes up against a Kentucky defense that, like I mentioned, vulnerable in terms of their perimeter defense, and they have the 82nd ranked adjusted defensive efficiency nationally overall. Looking ahead, could be a smash spot for Kentucky with John Calipari and Arkansas on deck in Rupp. If they do indeed lose this one, that would be 3 losses in a row going into the Arkansas matchup against Cal. But I look at this with Tennessee as an 8.5, 9-point home favorite on the open at FanDuel. Maybe a good spot to bet Tennessee live, but I don't think I could take the road dog with, again, I think regression, I know you don't like to use the D word, Justin, but I think regression is inevitable for Lanier in this Tennessee three-point shooting attack.
Interesting. Like negative regression.
Positive.
Oh, okay. Progression. I don't know. Positive regression, progression, whatever you want to call it. You're right. It is. It's drastically due. But they're also due to be worse on defense, which again, I think has a lot to do with just being exceptionally sized, tough to really quantify. And Kentucky, yeah, there's just some worries in terms of what their defense is doing in like the possession battle, not forcing the turnovers. Sure, they keep the ball very secure, but like the spacing allowed is very worrisome. Everyone's kind of making shots against them a little bit though, so I'm a little like concerned about how that continues to happen. Like they're expected to be pretty good at defending, but yet their defense is still, almost outside the top 50. It's interesting because, again, they're not really allowing a high rim and three rate, but they seem to essentially be getting cooked in the mid-range to the tune of like 40%. And then facing a lot of it. So pretty interesting. You would think that at some point it starts working a lot better for Kentucky. And I would say that that's where the shot quality value is taking this away dog. It's probably not a lot.
Really?
It's maybe a point or two in Kentucky's favor, but you're getting 9. I think shot quality would probably put this at 8, 7.5. And again, you're paying a lot of tax right now for home teams. I feel like in the market, maybe it's calmed down a little bit because like away teams kind of had a bit of a weekend or a week last week. But yeah, I think 9's heavy. I don't really want to pay 9. I think if it's at 9, I lean towards Kentucky, but would say this is a pretty good line. Make it like 8.5, 7.5, 8 for me personally is what I would expect. I haven't really been able to run anything yet. So
yeah, my issue with Kentucky in this spot, and like I said, I wouldn't bet the pregame number unless it dips drastically in the Wildcats' favor, but maybe a live look at Tennessee under a possession if Kentucky gets off to a hot start, because you go back to the Georgia loss for Kentucky on the road, the Alabama loss at home. What do those two teams have in common? They're ultra physical, and also you mentioned drop coverage for Kentucky, or at least opponents shooting well in the mid-range.
Yeah.
A clear-cut byproduct of Amari Williams and Garrison in drop. Tennessee, they can get those looks for Lanier. So whether it's from 3 or in the mid-range, I think this is a great, maybe player prop-wise, even if you want to stay away from the spread, good spot for Lanier to have a good offensive output.
Yep, I agree. I think there's plenty of reason to expect him to be able to get good spacing off of this team. That's kind of like where they've really struggled. So both teams actually allow their opponents to develop good spacing, and both teams can shoot. So sneaky over at 147.5. That's probably something I like. I would expect some scoring in this fun matchup.
Speaking of fun, we got 2 mid-major games to handicap, tipping it off with VCU at St. Louis. The Rams, bit of an at-large contender at this point if they don't win the A-10 tournament, or even if you lose it. And yeah, I mean, this an interesting resume for sure. 6-game winning streak to be exact, including a win over St. Louis on January 14th. And St. Louis in that game shot over 39% from 3, but VCU didn't have an efficient night offensively. 22 offensive rebounds made up for it. The 41st highest offensive rebounding clip in college basketball. Overall, you go back and you look at VCU's full body of work, they do give up their fair share of threes, which may be a good spot for St. Louis to continue performing well, or at least dating back to that first matchup for Robbie Avila. But do you trust St. Louis on the glass? That's probably what this game comes down to if VCU is inefficient again.
I do kind of trust them on the glass. You're right. This is likely where it's going to come down to. VCU plays a very smart game that can lead to them absolutely destroying efficiencies, destroying what shot quality might even expect. I mean, they expected to lose the St. Joseph's game on the road, which kind of makes some sense. They won that 76-60, and that was just a really cold shooting night for Joe's. And St. Louis at home, they won that by like 16. Shot quality expected that to be huge, almost like 30 points, which is maybe going to surprise you when I tell you that the value is going to be on St. Louis. And I think a little surprising, actually, to see the number come from 6 to 5.5 since the open. But surprising because I would expect people to be like, oh, well, they blew them up. No, it's what happens sometimes. Teams have bad games. This is likely one of the worst games that St. Louis is going to have on the season. They kind of just got bodied. They didn't really know what they were running into, but they've looked better, I think, St. Louis, since that happened. And I think, it's been an interesting, 2 weeks since that game for SLU. They lost to George Washington, close one on the road. They beat LaSalle at home, and then they beat Richmond on the road. So they bounced back almost immediately Richmond's a little weak this season, but St. Louis, for shot quality, developing the third best half-court expectancy. Really good out of both the ball screen, off screens. They're good in the ISO. They run a lot of cuts, which is, of course, valuable. And they take a lot of off-the-dribble threes. So everything looks great for them. They've had maybe a little bit of trouble in terms of hitting their shots. A lot of expected progression to the mean, positive regression, almost 5% from 3, 4% from mid-range.
Everything you would expect from a Josh Schertz team.
Exactly. Buy low, buy low, buy low. Maybe even getting a little baby brother, just, welcome to the club kid and like for coming into his own. It happens all the time. It just does it. It can be tough. Especially, this isn't just a mid-major, right? This is one of the best mid-major conferences in the country. You're not going and taking a new role in the MAAC, where if you play well, you can get teams to roll over on the road even. This is a tough conference. So, yeah, it's going to be tough, but it's a home game, home dog in a conference that has been good against home teams. I think you can see, I think, what is this? St. Louis, I think the A10 is doing pretty well in terms of home win percentage. I can tell you right now. Let's see, home win percentage. All right, 5th best in the nation. So
it's a good
35
nugget.
of 53 games in the A10 have been won by the home team. And not a lot of blowouts. So, we'll see how it goes. It's an interesting conference. St. Louis is the best defense on KenPom, best effective field goal allowed on KenPom. The defense definitely struggles, but it really comes from mostly turning the ball over too much, not getting any offensive rebounds. They're good shooters at the rim, but they're terrible from 3, which, again, a lot of expected progression. This is probably a play I know I'm going to take. I buy low on SLU here.
All right, I like it.
Sell high on VCU. I think it's a double whammy. So it might be very well could be my pick of the day tomorrow.
No argument for me there. I will say, just looking ahead, like far ahead, a couple months away from March Madness, a little less than that, which is super exciting to even say out loud here on the show. VCU, if they get into the tournament, absolutely can win at least a game. You look at their personnel metrics on KenPom, 114th in bench minutes, so you have depth to give teams havoc defensively with that ball pressure. 38th in Division I experience, 54th in minutes continuity, 70th in average height. So just in terms of length and generating those second chance shots off of misses if you have a cold shooting night on a neutral court. I really like the makeup of this team. I like your spot play on St. Louis, but VCU an interesting team to watch in March for sure.
I agree. I think I'm still high on Dayton, especially against the market. So I do think if you can get like an interesting price on VCU to miss the tournament, they're not getting an at-large. And yeah, it might be tough for Dayton, but I still take Dayton on a neutral right now for sure.
Give me Max Shulga in the tournament. I need myself some Max Shulga in the dance for the Rams.
That's gonna look. I'm disappointed that last year was the final year at Barclays for the A10. That is the last thing I'll say on it. What a tragedy. I get it. Maybe moving a little bit more over there. I might end up having to take the Amtrak down. It's only 3 hours, but that's a great tournament. What a shame. I hope someone comes and picks up that location. MAAC, if any of the commissioners are listening, get out of Atlantic City, get to Brooklyn. That'd be fun.
Love it. That is a sicko talking right there. On to another A10 matchup, Dayton. The aforementioned Dayton Flyers at St. Bonaventure. There were a couple spots, including this game, that I have had circled for a a few days going back to last week, one being Georgetown. I do kind of want to see where the market goes before playing that one. The other was Bonaventure. I cannot wait to back the Bonnies here as a home dog. So hear my argument before you give yours, Justin. If you're watching on YouTube, you see JP's reaction to my Bonnies take. So only regular season meeting between these two programs this season. Dayton rebounding in a big way from a 3-game A-10 losing streak to 3 straight wins. So they're kind of playing to their non-conference potential a bit here, at least over the last few games, winning all of them. But you look at KenPom, statistically speaking, St. Bonaventure is one of the unluckiest teams in the country, number 330 in luck percentage to be exact. And there are legitimate reasons why to back that up. 6 losses, all 6 of their losses by 5 points or fewer, and their opponents have shot a 75.6% clip from the free throw line. That's good for top 40, top 30 in college basketball. I am a Mark Schmidt stan till I die. You go back to 2 of their last 3 losses. Chance Moore, the Most State transfer, really good pickup for Schmidt in the offseason. Didn't play.
Can't deny that.
Thank you. And he did play for a bit, I will say, caveat, did play for a bit in the George Mason loss, but only played 13 minutes, then exited with the injury. And shot quality, by the way, actually credited St. Bonaventure a much closer score than a 13-point loss to George Mason. Key for me is, this is big. Can the Bonnies and Noel Brown, 93rd percentile, by the way, per synergy and post-up efficiency on a points-per-possession basis, can he take advantage of Latang and Key for this Dayton post-up defense? Because you look at the Flyers at that end of the court down low, protecting the basket. It's not pretty, but they don't allow a ton of post-ups because of their ball pressure. Opponents only getting the ball on post-up touches in the 4th percentile. So, again, the Bonnies don't let the opposition really get the ball down low, and then 17th percentile on a points-per-possession basis for opponents scoring the ball down low. So if you look at, again, personnel matchups, if Brown and Bonaventure can control the pace to their liking, both teams want to slow it down. But if the Bonnies can be efficient in that half-court offense against Latang and Key, I really like St. Bonaventure as a home dog here, Justin.
I mean, maybe I tipped my hand before saying that I would take Dayton on a neutral floor against, maybe the team expected to win the conference right now. I would take them against Bonaventure too. I will be on Dayton. I think
even with the spot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Again, look. Here's the problem. You got to take a look at St. Bonaventure and how they did in that non-conference and how many of those big wins that are involved and how they're priced were likely a little inflated. We're not talking about every single win, but I'm talking about 20 points over Siena. I'm talking about crushing Niagara. I'm talking about crushing Fordham. I mean, these were things, and that's not even non-conference Fordham, but those were all expected to be much closer. And I think that happens a lot. Maybe it slides under the radar that, they get into the conference. Everyone was talking about St. Bonaventure. Everyone's, talking them up that maybe they should be the team that goes to the Big East from the A-10. They've won all these games. I mean, they only lost 1 game, right? From the start of the season, they only lost the Utah State game, which, to their credit, Utah State is a great team. But guess what? They lost by 5 points, Eli. Shot quality expected of 21. So we were gassing them up way too much from the get-go. All right,
I don't know about that.
They were overperforming. I think they were though, because guess what? They've rattled off 5 losses in their last 6, and none of them were expected to be shot quality wins. They have not had any help from the numbers. VCU loss was the worst one yet. Dayton, I understand it's the spot, but here's the thing. Here's the problem. When you circled it months ago, Dayton wasn't in trouble. Right? So there's no sleepy Dayton cruising into the A-10 and big, hungry, sleepy SBU can strike when they're not looking. No, Dayton needs every win because they're not getting the bid. They need the seeding. They need to not play more games. They need to get the favorable draw. Tight line here. I like the money line for Dayton. I think the spread's fine. But man, if shot quality's numbers are correct, you got St. Bonaventure as, the 11th best half-court offense in conference play alone right now. You have them allowing the 15th best spacing in the conference in conference play alone right now. Shot making against is not looking good. Shot selection on offense not looking good. Open 3 rate in conference play looking bad. I don't know why Dayton's the team they figured out against. They can't get through almost anyone else in this conference. They were overperforming. And let's little handshake. I'll roll up the sleeves, Eli. I'm happy to be wrong. This is the shot I take every time.
Okay, fair enough. Your points are warranted in terms of their non-conference success, especially against lower major opponents. But 2 possession or less negative luck, if you look at, again, all their losses coming by 2 possessions or less. I mean, that's flat out unlucky. And Mark Schmidt, again, you want to knock on him, I get it, but he is one of the more underrated. Yeah.
He's been great. He's coach of the conference. There's overperforming isn't a bad thing. I think it just leads to lines that then you're buying him continuing to overperform, right? You're buying him to continue to be that good, and he might be. He might be. I just think the price is likely a little too high for it. That's all. That's my only thing. I'm not talking about 20% off, right? I'm literally saying that I probably think I have like maybe a 3% ROI on this thing, so I'll take the bet. So could lose it plenty of times over and still probably be pretty happy with my analysis. We'll see. It's going to be one of the greatest games of the day for sure. Got to watch.
Yeah, ESPN Plus games, so I get it if you're maybe a little more inclined to watch VCU and St. Louis on CBS Sports Network. But to me, this is a very, very good spot to back Bonaventure. Now, Justin's points are warranted, especially looking at Dayton coming off of 3 straight wins. It's not like it's a 6 or 7 game winning streak. Seeding is going to be very important in the A10 tournament. I would argue this is an even bigger game, though, for Bonaventure at home. And to your point, you mentioned home success, just straight up wins for the conference at home. And St. Bonaventure absolutely needs this one. So I'll take the Bonnies to win outright, and I'll take the 1.5 right now on open. I don't think this goes in Dayton's direction, so maybe you may even get a little bit more value on Dayton.
I mean, the home teams have been, again, if you like a road team, unless they're like a real public darling, you can usually wait.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's wrap it up here quickly, Justin. A couple of bets that you have circled. I'll give my quick takes here after, but Oklahoma at number 13, Texas A&M, and UNC at Pitt, underratedly big ACC game, at least for tournament seeding purposes, and maybe even for the NCAA tournament at that matter. Absolutely, actually looking at the resume for the Tar Heels and Panthers respectively. So 2 minutes or less, give me your picks for both of these games.
Yeah, I think you got to take UNC here against Pitt. I'll go that one first. And look, there's a lot on the line here. UNC plus 3.5 right now as we record. They've been really honestly struggling. Boston College game looked terrible. Guess what? Shot quality expected a 17-point win, a cover pretty easily. Just a tough game for them. Boston College basically hit everything. It was their best 3-point shooting game of the year. So yeah, if that happens, sometimes you're going to cover. So I think it's a great spot to go in, get North Carolina that's still taking shots like a top 25 team. This Pittsburgh team is a team that shot quality is low on. They look a little bit more like a, top 50, top 60 team. You're going to pay around 40-ish for both of them. And we talked about that shape of that distribution, right? That's where this stuff starts to come in a little bit. Getting up to that like 20 range, falling down to that 60 range is bigger than it sounds. Like you're getting into a very almost different tiers in terms of the adjusted efficiency. So yeah, I like this here, 3.5. I think this should probably be a pick 'em, maybe even -1 for UNC.
And then Texas A&M, Oklahoma.
Boom. Yeah. This is a really interesting one. Oklahoma's been kind of hated on in the market for long enough that I think you can buy in. Texas A&M, pretty lucky. I mean, this offense and honestly a little bit of the defense too expected to be worse. The defense, the 3-point shooting, the mid-range shooting against, the finishing at the rim, they've been exceptional. And the defense in the conference is just a little bit worrisome in terms of just honestly the three-point defense. They see way too much catch-and-shoot threes, and guess what? Oklahoma can hit them. So there's going to be some variance. We sold high on Oklahoma early in the season. Now's the time to buy low a little bit. They lost those 4 straight games there. It is a gauntlet in the SEC. I mean, they already lost to A&M, right, by 2. Shot quality expected a win. Now on the road, I just don't think you want to move it that much. I think you probably want this thing a little bit closer to 6. So you want to give me 9? I'll take 9. That's plenty of points. SEC games are Big 12 games are battles.
Yeah, and rematch, if you look back a couple weeks ago, a couple different rematches that we touched on here on the show. A few, to be exact, with Georgetown.
I had it right the first time.
SEC.
It is
long day.
Late on a busy Monday night. Woo! But yeah, I always trust your first intuition. Never second guess yourself.
One quick thing on this game, a couple quick points on each. RJ Davis, to your point, starting to shoot a lot better, and he is due for even more regression. A well above average three-point shooter in his career, yet just under 30% from deep this season. He's gotten going in his last 3, but this is a big spot for him and for Jalen Lowe and Pitt for that matter. I would say between the two, and granted, Lowe only has a year and a half under his belt, but if Lowe outperforms Davis, probably a Pitt win, maybe even a Pitt cover. If Davis starts to or continues to shoot, I don't want to say lights out, but continues to shoot well from 3 and outperforming his season-long numbers, probably a cover and maybe an outright win for UNC. And then with Texas A&M, a little bit of a disagreement from me, but not enough to bet it, or at least pregame, because A&M is coming off of that blown 20-plus point loss at Texas over the weekend. Yes, Oklahoma has revenge in mind from the first loss to A&M, but I don't trust Oklahoma on the glass, and I sure as hell don't trust them in the turnover department. Jeremiah Fears, 22.8% turnover rate, really struggled in that regard against the Aggies the first time around, and now Texas A&M has Wade Taylor in the lineup, unlike the first meeting. And you look at Oklahoma's defensive rebounding rate, 285th in the country, facing the #1 offensive rebounding clip in college basketball in the Aggies. So with that said, not enough to bet it at 8.5. The home tax is definitely there, coming off of a 20-plus point blown loss. But I like A&M to maybe win the game if they fall behind and you get a good live number, that kind of thing.
That type of thing I think definitely works. I have a tough time laying 9 with this team right now. It's a little bit, and they've been overperforming. We have them at 42nd, so it's a little bit of a tough sell, and that's okay. That's okay. The catch and shoot hasn't been great. They're pretty good when it comes down to a few things offensively, but I mean, for them, if you want Texas A&M, it's because you think that like the defense continues to overperform, and I just I sell overperformance like it's my job.
Absolutely, that's what shot quality does, and for good reason. Great metrics as always, and always a fun show here. Justin, you can follow him on X at Justin Perri 8 Shot Quality Bets, and Shot Quality, be sure to check out shotqualitybets.com. And you can follow me on X at Eli Hershkovich. Thanks for watching and listening to this edition of Beat the Closed Number presented by thelines.com. Check out the best odds and sportsbook promos over at thelines.com and find my best bets in our Discord channel. The link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner. So long, everybody, and good luck with your college basketball bets.